If you won't give land in the house, we'll see you in court. That sentence, exactly like that, was how my father opened the call. No hello, no pause, no warning, just boom. I was standing in the middle of my kitchen, barefoot, still holding a cup of tea I'd just microwaved. The ceramic turned cold in my hand. The silence on my end must have sounded like shock, because it was. Not even, "How are you, huh?" I heard my mother inhale sharply in the background, like she was bracing for something awful, or maybe just the reaction she knew she deserved. Then came the rest of the sentence, like a punchline with no laugh track. "Landon needs stability. You don't have kids. It's just you in that big house. He's family. It's time you step up. Step up." I let out a shaky breath, eyes fixed on the sunlight slanting across my living room floor, the floor I'd sanded myself for weeks, on my knees, inhaling sawdust until my sinuses bled. The house they now wanted me to hand over, like it was a casserole dish. "Are you serious?" I said, voice flat. There was a click on the line, the soft mechanical cue that another line had joined. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Hart. This is Darren Cho, legal counsel for Ms. Sienna Hart. Just a reminder, this call is now being recorded." My lawyer's voice was calm, measured, like he was announcing the weather, and then he laughed. Not a loud laugh, not disrespectful, but it was unmistakable, low, dry, amused, like someone just heard a toddler try to explain calculus. "Sorry," Darren added, clearing his throat. "I just didn't expect to start my Tuesday morning with this." Silence. Then my father's voice dropped an octave, sharp with offense. "Excuse me?" "I said," Darren replied smoothly. I didn't expect to hear such a bold threat, especially from two people who have no legal claim to a property that Ms. Hart purchased, renovated, and maintained with her own income. So yes, I'm amused. Temporarily. That will pass. Another pause. And then, predictably, my mother snapped, "We raised her. Everything she has is because of us." I felt my jaw tighten. Darren didn't miss a beat. "Raising your child is not a loan, Mrs. Hart. It's not a contract with repayment terms. And unless you'd like to attempt to convince a judge that love and diapers entitle you to a 5-bedroom Craftsman in Queen Anne, I suggest you rethink your approach." The phone line crackled, then ended, just like that. No goodbye, just the sound of a threat dissolving into dead air. And I stood there, still holding my cold tea, finally realizing this was it. This wasn't just about the house. This was about control, ownership, the belief that I was just temporary, that my independence was a phase, that everything I built could be taken away the moment they felt entitled to it. I put the mug down. My hand was trembling, not with fear, with rage. Darren glanced up from his laptop and raised an eyebrow. "You good?" I looked at him, really looked at him. Calm, strategic, exactly the kind of person you wanted when your parents decided to go nuclear on your peace. "They really think they can win," I said. He smiled, no teeth. "That's the best part. They haven't even begun to lose yet. If you've ever been called selfish for protecting what you built, if your family ever used love as a leash, tell me in the comments, what would you do if your parents tried to sue you for your own house? Because for me, that phone call wasn't just the beginning of a lawsuit. It was the beginning of my freedom. After that call, I couldn't sit still. I paced the living room, the floorboards creaking softly beneath my steps. Floorboards I had laid myself. Every plank. A reminder of choices no one else understood or supported. My family never saw this house the way I did. To them, it was just a fixer-upper I sunk my youth into, a money pit, an obsession. To me, it was the first thing I ever truly chose for myself, and I chose it alone. Let me paint you a picture. My father, Eli Hart, is the kind of man who believes quiet is a form of power, a retired professor who weaponized silence. When he disapproved, he wouldn't argue. He'd simply sigh, long and low, just enough to make you feel stupid for trying. My mother, Vivian, is all about appearances, always has been. She doesn't cry. She dabs. She doesn't get angry. She gets disappointed. Her favorite phrase growing up? What would the neighbors think? And then there's Landon, my little brother, 3 years younger, 2 decades more reckless. He's charming, in the way hurricanes are charming from space. Up close, all he ever did was destroy. Crypto schemes, failed startups, a Tesla repoed in our parents' driveway. Still, somehow, he was the golden child. He messed up louder, but got forgiven faster. And Margot. Margot is my mother's older sister, the black sheep. She questioned too much, asked about the will too early, and was iced out of the family like expired milk. I hadn't spoken to her in years, not because I didn't want to, but because contact with Margot came with a price. The full wrath of Vivian. So no. I wasn't surprised when they chose Landon. I just wasn't expecting them to demand I give him the house. They didn't ask. They ordered. I walked to the window, looked out over the small garden blooming in the backyard. Wild roses had finally taken root after 3 failed seasons. Just like me. They needed more time, more light, less interference. This house wasn't a luxury. It was my lifeline. 5 years ago, I bought it for $180,000, a 2-story Victorian that everyone told me was a disaster. Cracked foundation, rotting roof, lead pipes. The realtor literally apologized to me before handing over the keys. But I saw past the mold and termites. I saw potential. I saw myself. I drained every dollar from my savings account, took weekend shifts at the design firm, moved into the house with nothing but an air mattress and a toolkit I didn't know how to use yet. That first winter, I slept in a coat, a real coat, inside. The heater was shot, and I couldn't afford a new one, not with the roof leaking into the kitchen, so I cooked on a camping stove and boiled water in a kettle I found at a yard sale for $2. I spent $22,000 just fixing the roof, another $15,000 for rewiring, thousands more on floors, insulation, paint. But the real price? Time. Loneliness. Birthdays missed. Holidays spent sanding windows. While my parents posted group photos, me not included, with captions like, "Family is everything." They never once visited during the renovation, not even when I fell off a ladder and cracked a rib. You'd think that might have prompted a casserole. Nope, just a text from Mom. Maybe this is a sign to come home, as if this house wasn't my home. I think the first seed of resistance was planted that night, lying on a heating pad, ribs aching, eyes stinging from sawdust, and silence. Not anger, not yet, but something colder, something quieter. A realization they didn't think I'd make it. And worse, they didn't want me to, because if I did, it would mean I didn't need them. And people like my mother, they don't handle not being needed. I didn't know it yet, but that house would become more than walls and paint and reclaimed wood. It would become proof that I could survive, that I could build, that I could choose myself. So when Darren asked me right after the call if the house was in my name, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I told him, paid in full with receipts. He nodded, quietly impressed. Then, half joking, he said, "Tell me you kept photos." I pulled out a folder from the shelf, bulging, organized by month, by project, by pain. Every scar in the drywall, every before and after, every hour of sweat turned into sunlight. I built this place brick by broken brick, and now they wanted to steal it. But it's too late. They planted the seed. Now watch it grow. You ever notice how some people can burn the whole damn house down and still get handed the keys to a new one? That's Landon, my brother, the chosen one, the favorite, the golden child with a rusted soul. I used to think I was just being petty, that maybe I was imagining the favoritism, maybe I was too sensitive. You know, Sienna, why do you always have to make everything about you? But facts don't lie. And Landon's record? Oh, it speaks volumes. Let me break it down for you. At 23, he dropped out of his second college after failing 4 core classes and somehow blaming the professors. They just didn't get my mind, he said. At 25, he borrowed $50,000 from our parents to launch a tech startup that was literally a drop-shipping store, selling bamboo toothbrushes. It lasted 6 months. You know what lasted longer? The YouTube ad he made for it. He filmed it shirtless. At 27, he got heavy into crypto, said he was going to build generational wealth, lost everything in a Luna crash, then borrowed more from mom and dad, of course, because that's what investors do. They reinvest with other people's money. Meanwhile, I was working 60-hour weeks, rationing groceries to save up for copper plumbing. But guess who got a new iPhone every year? Guess who drove a leased Tesla with vanity plates that said LNDN 10X? Guess who still got invited to every family vacation while I stayed back repainting cabinets? And every time he crashed, because Landon always crashes, there was a safety net. Vivian and Eli Hart, our parents, played their roles perfectly. Mom would swoop in with her soft, surgical sighs. He's just figuring it out. Boys mature slower. And Dad would give that look, like he's disappointed in everyone. But Landon, I remember this one night, family dinner, Thanksgiving. Landon had just lost his 3rd job in under a year. I was talking about a community design award I'd won. Nothing big, but it meant something to me. Mid-sentence, Mom interrupted to ask if Landon wanted more gravy. Like I didn't even exist. That was the night I stopped trying to be seen. You see, Landon wasn't just favored. He was protected, cushioned, polished. He could fail upward for the rest of his life and still somehow be the pride of the family. And the worst part, he knew it. Oh, he thrived in it. He played the misunderstood genius card, the I'm too big for this town narrative. And when things went wrong, it was never his fault. It was the market, the partner, the weather, Mercury in retrograde. Pick a scapegoat. He had a Rolodex. I once asked my dad, why does Landon keep getting bailed out? He looked at me, not unkindly, and said, because he's not like you. He can't do it on his own. Like that was a compliment, as if my independence was a liability, as if the whole point of being capable was so they could neglect me with a clear conscience. So when they told me Landon needed stability, what they really meant was he needed a soft place to land. Again. And my house, the one I built from splinters and spite, was supposed to be it, because Landon, he always lands. On someone else's back, but not this time. This time, he was going to hit concrete. The letter came on a Tuesday. It didn't arrive by email or text. No, Aunt Margot was far too deliberate for something that casual. It was real, physical, folded in 3, postmarked from Oregon, addressed in her slanted cursive to Miss Sienna Hart, like we were back in the 1950s. I found it wedged between a plumbing bill and an HOA notice. For a moment, I thought it was a card. Then I saw the handwriting and froze. Aunt Margot. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in my family in years, not without a scoff attached to it. She always thought she deserved more. She never understood what family means. She poisoned Thanksgiving in '98. But the truth, Margot just asked questions no one else dared to. I opened the letter at the kitchen counter, fingers smudged with graphite dust from a sketch I'd been working on. The paper felt thick, linen texture, like something that held weight. And it did. Sienna, I heard about the situation. I'm sorry, but not surprised. If you're reading this, I suspect things have escalated. Let me guess. They're calling you selfish, telling you Landon needs the house, framing your independence as cruelty. I know, because they did it to me too. I sank into the chair, heart thudding louder with each word. 25 years ago, when your grandfather passed, he left a chunk of property in his will. 3 acres, small home, a bit of land with apple trees. I asked once if we could divide it evenly between me and your mom. The next week, I was uninvited from Christmas. My eyes burned. I blinked hard. Vivian said I made things uncomfortable. Your dad stopped returning my calls. Even your grandparents, who loved me, quietly stepped back. They chose silence over fairness. The property went entirely to your mother, and I became the family ghost. Ghost. The word landed like ice in my stomach. I'm telling you this not for pity, but for clarity. This family has a pattern, Sienna. It rewards silence, it punishes assertion, and it rewrites the narrative until the person who asks for fairness looks like the villain. I sat still for a long time, letter in my lap, kettle hissing, forgotten, on the stove. This wasn't just my story. This was a rerun with a new lead, but the same tired script. Margot had been erased, and now it was my turn. I thought back to the Thanksgiving when Landon got extra gravy while I was mid-sentence. I thought back to the baby photo albums that stopped including me after age 12, to the group texts I was never part of, the birthdays where I got a Sienna from Mom instead of a call. And now, they wanted to take the only thing I'd built on my own terms. History didn't just repeat itself in my family, it recycled. But Margot's letter didn't end in bitterness. It ended in fire. You were always the one who asked better questions, the one who didn't fit neatly into their control. If they're trying to erase you now, it's because you've stepped out of their narrative, and that terrifies them. Burn the script, Sienna. Write your own ending. There was no return address, no phone number, just her name. Margaret Hart, underlined once. And taped to the bottom of the envelope was a photo, faded, a little grainy. It was her and my mom, maybe in their 20s, standing in front of what looked like this house. My house. Margot was here once. She knew this place, maybe even loved it, before I did. The realization was quiet, but electric. They erased her, but the house remembered. And now it was remembering me too. It started with a blister, one of those wallpaper bubbles that appears overnight, like the wall itself is trying to breathe. I'd noticed it in the upstairs hallway for months. Every time I walked past it, it whispered, "Fix me." And every time I told myself, "I'll get to it later." Later came on a rainy Sunday. I was halfway through cleaning out the hall closet when I caught the corner of the bubble with my elbow. The paper tore, with a sound like someone exhaling after holding their breath for too long. Underneath, another layer of wallpaper, older, yellowing, faded roses. I could have left it alone. God knows I had enough on my plate, but something about it felt personal, like the house was trying to show me something, like someone was. So I grabbed a blade and started peeling, strip by strip, memory by memory. About 2 feet in, I hit a seam that felt off, uneven, too thick. I paused, ran my fingers along it. There was something tucked behind the wallboard, folded, wedged between insulation and wood, like a secret kept too long. I carefully pried it out. It was a letter, old, paper yellowed at the edges. The handwriting, a gentle looping cursive, sent a chill straight down my spine. To whom it may concern, from the desk of Martha Hart, dated August 14th, 1998, my grandmother. I sat down right there on the floor, dust on my jeans, heart pounding loud in my ears. The walls around me felt like they were holding their breath again. I opened the letter. This house was the first real thing I ever earned without a man's name attached to it. I bought it in 1964 with my own wages, my own credit, and my own stubbornness. People told me it was too much, too broken, too big for a woman on her own. But I saw what it could be. I saw what I could be, inside it. I swallowed hard. This wasn't just a letter. This was a testament. It is my desire that this property be passed to Sienna Hart, my granddaughter, when I am gone. She is the only one who has ever looked at this place with the same eyes I once had. The others, they only see what it's worth on paper. I blinked fast, my vision starting to blur. She saw me, she really saw me. But then something changed. The next part of the letter was scratched out. Several lines. Black ink heavily dragged across them, so aggressively that the paper was torn in places. Underneath the mess, I could still make out a few words. Pressure from Vivian. Said it wouldn't be fair to Landon. I didn't agree. And then, handwritten in the margins, in smaller, tighter script, I'm hiding this copy in the wall, just in case. I stared at those words for a long time. She knew. She knew they would erase her, rewrite her wishes, just like they did with Margot, just like they were trying to do with me. And still, she fought, in the only way she could. She left her truth in the bones of this house. The wallpaper fluttered next to me, like breath. I reached for my phone, hands trembling, snapped photos, sent them to Darren, no caption. A minute later, he replied with just 3 words, chain of custody. I gently placed the letter in a Ziploc, labeled it, dated it. My handwriting shaking but deliberate. Evidence not just of legal standing. Evidence of legacy, of love. The kind they never wanted me to have. I sat in the hallway for what felt like hours, staring at the torn wall, the jagged edge where truth met plaster. And I realized my grandmother built this house with her bare hands. I rebuilt it with mine. And now, between us, across decades and drywall, we were fighting the same war. Only this time, they wouldn't bury her voice. Not again. The email came at 2:43 a.m. Subject line, preliminary findings. It's worse than we thought. I stared at Darren's message for a long time before clicking. I was lying in bed, unable to sleep. The letter from Grandma Martha still burned into the back of my eyelids. I'd been trying to remember her voice, the scent of her lotion, the way she tapped her fingers when thinking. But now, all I could hear was the sound of betrayal sharpening itself. I opened the attachment, and just like that, the last thread of doubt snapped. Darren had dug deep. Wills, deeds, bank transfers, trustee records. And in between those cold, emotionless PDFs was the story I'd been dreading. My grandmother's original trust, the one that named me and Landon as equal beneficiaries, had been revised 2 weeks before her death. The revision removed me. On paper, it looked clean, legal, tidy. But Darren's notes told a different story. Timing is suspicious. Martha Hart was on heavy medication at this point. No record of her requesting legal counsel herself. The change was filed by Eli Hart, your father, as trustee and medical proxy. Medical proxy. They used her sedation as a loophole. There it was, in writing. My inheritance was erased with a pen stroke. Not because she changed her mind, but because someone else guided her hand. The assets that were supposed to be split between me and Landon, cash, stocks, a slice of the old vineyard property, had been funneled entirely into Landon's name. And it didn't stop there. Of the $350,000 transferred into the Landon Hart investment account over a 14-month period, nearly all was liquidated within 2 years. Majority went into failed ventures, including crypto positions, NFT acquisitions, and consulting fees paid to unverifiable sources. He burned it. Every dollar gone. But wait, it gets better. Several family accounts show overlapping activity. Transfers from your grandmother's estate into joint accounts shared by your parents. Some of that money was then moved again to cover outstanding debts in Landon's name. So not only did they steal my half, they drained Grandma's entire legacy to cover my brother's mess. I wasn't disinherited. I was defunded by the people who gave me life. I felt the rage crawl under my skin, slow and cold. Not fire. Ice. I scrolled further. Darren had highlighted an internal memo from the law office that handled the estate. Just a brief note on file. Client's granddaughter, Sienna Hart, not present or mentioned. Notified by Vivian Hart that she knows and understands the family's wishes. I never saw that memo because I never even knew there was something to see. They spoke for me, erased me, and then had the audacity to say I should understand. Understand what? That silence equals agreement? That obedience is the price of being loved? No, not anymore. The final attachment was a copy of my grandmother's first trust, the one Darren tracked down through probate archives. It was dated 7 years earlier. Clean, clear, witnessed by a different lawyer. And right there, in print, to my granddaughter, Sienna Hart, I leave an equal share of my financial estate, including but not limited to all liquid assets, dividends, and stock holdings, alongside her brother, Landon Hart. My name, my right, my proof. They'd buried it like they buried Margot, like they buried Grandma's wishes behind plaster and paint. But unlike before, I was here to dig it up. At 3:15 a.m., I forwarded everything to Darren with 2 words. Let's begin. He replied instantly, already building the case. We have enough to allege trust manipulation, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraud. Once discovery starts, they'll have to turn over financials. This is just the surface. Just the surface. The surface was a fake trust, a rerouted inheritance, a son who squandered, and parents who covered the stench with silence. What lay beneath? That we were about to find out. But I already knew this. They didn't just steal money. They stole my grandmother's voice. And I was going to make sure the court heard it, loud and clear. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, embossed with the county seal, like it was trying to look important instead of petty. Inside, a formal notice of civil litigation. Plaintiffs Eli and Vivian Hart. Defendant Sienna Hart. Subject, unlawful withholding of family property. It didn't say daughter, didn't say dispute, just defendant. They really did it. They sued me. The same people who once taught me to write my name, now trying to strip it from the deed I fought to earn. Darren read the document first, then whistled low. They're accusing you of reneging on an oral agreement to gift the house to your brother. I blinked. Oral agreement? He nodded grimly. No proof, no signature, just their word. I almost laughed. Almost, but it died in my throat. Because in my family, their word was gospel. Until now, the court date was set. The machine started turning. But what hit harder than the lawsuit itself was the campaign. Not legal, emotional. Within 48 hours, the family group chat exploded. Aunt Cheryl, I just don't understand how you could take legal action against your own parents. Uncle Matt, this is disgusting. Family doesn't do this. Cousin Rachel, you need help, Sienna. Someone's poisoned your mind. Grandma's church friend, Janet, I always knew you were troubled. But this... My phone was on fire, notification after notification. No one asked for my side. They already picked one. Because the narrative was simple, clean, familiar. Sienna snapped. Sienna became bitter. Sienna's lawyer turned her against her own blood. Classic Darvo. Deny, we'd never do that to her. Attack. She's ungrateful, unstable, money-hungry. Reverse victim. We're heartbroken. We just want our family back. Even my father, who barely spoke to me for years, suddenly found his voice. He wrote a 4-paragraph Facebook post titled, "When Your Own Child Turns Away." It got 97 likes. My mother posted a photo of Landon as a baby, captioned, "Some bonds are too sacred to break, unless someone teaches you how." I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. They weren't just suing me for a house, they were suing me for a story, for the right to be the victim. They cried in public and calculated in private. Meanwhile, Landon, silent, no calls, no texts, not even a meme. Just radio silence while the parents did his dirty work. I started getting looks at work. One of the interns asked, "Is your family, in the news?" Apparently, someone had leaked the lawsuit to a local blog, probably Cousin Rachel. She always did want to be a source. The headline read, "Daughter sued by parents over stolen family home." No mention of the fake trust. No mention of 5 winters without heat. No mention of the letter hidden behind the wall. Just the optics. Just the drama. Just enough to make me look like a monster in heels. At night, I lay awake with my laptop, watching YouTube videos about narcissistic parents, inheritance fraud, emotional manipulation. Each one felt like it had been written about me. Darren kept me grounded, kept reminding me, we have the facts, they have the performance. But performance wins when the audience is family. Even my godmother texted me, "Sweetie, maybe just give Landon the house. It's not worth all this." As if this was my doing. As if I asked to be dragged into a courtroom by the people who once cut my sandwiches into stars. The hearing was set for 2 weeks out. Until then, I had to live in a war zone painted like home. I changed the locks, canceled automatic payments, started prepping for discovery. But the worst part wasn't the lawsuit, wasn't the social media pity parade, wasn't even the betrayal. It was the silence from the ones who used to say, "We love you no matter what." Turns out, that came with terms and conditions. I never expected justice to arrive by voicemail, but there it was. An unfamiliar number, a crackling message, a voice that sounded like gravel and coffee, and maybe guilt. "Hi, this is Raymond Ellis. I used to manage your grandmother Martha's accounts. I think we should talk. I held on to something I probably wasn't supposed to, but it's yours now." I replayed it 3 times before calling Darren. He paused, then said, "Let's meet him. Bring a folder. Bring 2. We met Raymond the next morning. He suggested a Starbucks 2 towns over. Neutral ground, he said. Public but quiet. He wore a windbreaker, jeans, carried an old leather file case that looked older than me. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Your grandmother was sharp, even near the end. She knew what she wanted. She signed everything in front of me, and what she wanted was for you and your brother to split her estate. 50-50. No drama, no confusion. Then he opened the case. Inside, a folder labeled in black Sharpie. Martha Hart, Final Trust, Original, signed. He handed it to me like it was made of glass. And in there, page after page, was the truth. Her signature, a witness signature, his signature. No mention of being revised, no hint of disinheritance. Just a clear, direct instruction. To be divided equally between my 2 grandchildren, Sienna and Landon Hart. But that wasn't what was filed. That wasn't the version used in probate. That wasn't what the lawyers saw. When they told me, your grandmother changed her mind. No, that version came later, filed by my father, Eli, under medical power of attorney, during a time my grandmother was too drugged to recognize her own signature, let alone rewrite a trust. Raymond leaned back, sipped his coffee. His hands were still steady. I knew it was shady, he said. I kept a copy, quietly. Just in case someone ever asked the right questions, I guess you did. I swallowed hard, pulse pounding in my ears. It wasn't just a fake trust. It was a stolen legacy, wrapped in legal formatting, filed with a smile. But Raymond had receipts. More than that, he had records. Bank statements, wire logs, a timeline of transfers from my grandmother's estate into Landon's LLC, most of which were marked emergency restructuring, startup burn, or, my personal favorite, consulting advisory compensation. Darren read silently, jaw tightening. They rerouted every dime, he said, under the table, under your name. And then we saw it, a notation in a handwritten memo between my mom and their tax guy, rewriting estate distribution to reflect Sienna's emotional instability, prevents future legal entanglement. I felt the air leave my lungs. They didn't just erase me, they framed me. They created a paper trail to justify the lie. They didn't want my half, they wanted me silenced. Raymond didn't say much more, just packed up his folder and stood slowly. Before he left, he turned to me and said, "Your grandmother built everything she had with grit and gumption. She didn't suffer fools. And she sure as hell didn't leave anything behind for a trust fund failure in sneakers." He gave me a nod, like passing a baton. Then, he was gone. I sat there in silence, the file still warm in my lap. Outside, life went on. People ordering lattes, tapping on laptops, smiling at nothing. But inside me, a storm was organizing. They wanted this quiet, covered, buried, but they forgot something crucial. I'd spent 5 years pulling rot out of these walls. I knew how to spot a crack beneath fresh paint. And now I had blueprints. There's a specific kind of silence in a courtroom. Not peaceful, not reverent, it's waiting for damage. And in that silence, I sat, hands folded, jaw locked. Darren's briefcase beside me, like a loaded weapon. My parents sat across the aisle, all pearls and pressed collars, pretending this was just a tragic misunderstanding. Vivian Hart, my mother, dabbed at her eyes with a monogram tissue. Eli Hart, my father, kept his eyes forward, like if he didn't blink, this would all go away. And Landon, he wasn't here. Physically, yes. 2 rows behind them in a beige blazer he probably borrowed from Dad. But his soul, absent, floating, checked out. I could have almost pitied him. If I didn't know what was coming, Darren began calmly. Evidence tags, receipts, tax records, certified letters. A slow, surgical dissection of everything they'd tried to bury. Each fact was a scalpel. Funds were diverted from the estate prior to probate. Trust documents were substituted under questionable mental capacity. The defendant, Ms. Hart, was denied access to assets clearly outlined in the original trust. My parents' lawyer objected twice, once for irrelevance, once for emotional bias. Both overruled. Then Darren queued up the screen. The lights dimmed. "Your Honor," he said, voice crisp, "with permission, we'd like to submit a video recording as supplemental evidence, captured on a protected phone during an informal gathering 2 months ago. The voice is that of Landon Hart." I didn't breathe. The video played. The footage was grainy, cell phone quality, but the audio? Crystal. Landon, slightly tipsy, red Solo cup in hand, laughing in that careless, entitled way I knew too well. Of course I knew. Mom told me not to say anything. Said if I shut up, they'd make sure I was taken care of. Said Sienna would get over it eventually. She always does. A gasp from someone in the back. The judge blinked hard. Then another voice on the tape. A woman, Grace, Landon's ex-fiancée. "So, you knew the money was hers?" Pfft, look, she was never going to use it right. She spent 5 years painting that dump instead of investing. She doesn't get it. I did what was best for everyone. Pause. And Mom said, it's not stealing if the family agrees. Darren paused the video. Silence again. But this time, cracked silence. The kind that breaks something open. My mother swayed slightly in her seat. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do the plaintiffs deny that this is Mr. Landon Hart's voice? Their lawyer hesitated. My father stayed frozen. My mother, she collapsed. Right there on the courtroom bench, like her body couldn't hold the lie anymore. Gasps, a scramble. EMTs called, a recess declared. I didn't move. Because this wasn't a medical emergency. It was an emotional implosion. For decades, she controlled every narrative. This time, she couldn't edit the footage. They tried to blame me, sue me, smear me, but they couldn't control Landon's mouth or his ego. Turns out, hubris doesn't redact well on camera. Court resumed after 30 minutes. Vivian returned, pale and stiff, avoiding eye contact with everyone, including her husband. Eli sat stone-faced. No more words, because there were none left to spin. The judge cleared his throat. This court acknowledges that the video submitted substantially contradicts previous testimony. Further investigation into perjury and fraud may be warranted. He glanced toward my parents' table. I advised the plaintiffs to reconsider the pursuit of this case, because what's on the table now is criminal. Darren leaned close to me. It's over. They just don't know it yet. But I did. This wasn't just the fall of a lawsuit. It was the collapse of a facade, built on guilt, maintained through manipulation, protected by silence. Now, all of it was public record. I knew something had shifted when I pulled into Aunt Margot's driveway and saw the cars. Not just family, neighbors, friends from church, a few familiar names from childhood Christmas cards. Even my old English teacher, Mrs. Landon. This wasn't a dinner. It was a reckoning. With hors d'oeuvre. Margot met me at the door, lips tight but eyes warm. You don't have to speak, she said softly. You've done enough. Just show up, let them see. Inside, the air buzzed with something electric. Not anger, not yet, but anticipation. Like everyone was waiting for a curtain to rise. My parents arrived 20 minutes late. Vivian in her signature pearls, but they looked dull now, like costume jewelry in harsh light. Eli followed, silent as usual, eyes flicking from face to face, like he was trying to measure who'd still shake his hand. No one did. They sat at the long dining table like royalty, fallen from grace. Margot raised her glass. Tonight's not about sides. It's about truth, about what's been taken and what still might be restored. She didn't look at them, but everyone else did. Then it started. First, Aunt Helen. Vivian, you told me Sienna was unstable, that she ran off with family assets. But I read the court filings. That girl was building a home while your son was blowing inheritance on NFTs. Laughter, bitter, sharp. My mother blinked, lips parting slightly. Then, Uncle Joel, you lied to all of us. I vouched for you in the community, told people it was a misunderstanding. You made me complicit in stealing from your daughter. Then, Miss Landon, voice steady but cold. I taught Sienna in 8th grade. She worked 3 jobs to buy her own books. I should have known then, but I trusted your holiday letters more than I trusted my memory. My mother clutched her glass, but she didn't drink. Eli stayed motionless, almost like he wasn't even there. Then Grace. Yes, Grace, Landon's ex. She stepped out from the side hallway, elegant, in a black coat and clutch. I came tonight because I needed closure. Vivian, you told me I was marrying into a legacy. What you didn't say was that legacy was stolen. Silence. Until finally, Margot herself. She stepped forward, voice unwavering. 25 years ago, I asked for my fair share of my father's estate. You called me greedy, said I was dividing the family. You cut me out. I stayed quiet. I let you exile me. She turned, looked straight at me. But Sienna didn't. She fought. And that fight set something right, not just for her, but for all of us who were told to smile and swallow it. My throat tightened. Across the table, my mother's eyes shimmered with something wet. But it wasn't guilt. It was exposure, the kind of fear that comes when the mask finally slips, and the crowd doesn't applaud. She opened her mouth, and then the excuses began. We did what we thought was best. You don't know what raising a child like Sienna was like. So headstrong, so ungrateful. Someone scoffed. Mrs. Landon, I think. Ungrateful, she said. She paid for her own college, built her home, took care of her sick neighbor when you wouldn't even return her calls. Don't talk to us about ungrateful. My mother stopped. Not because she was done, but because no one was listening anymore. Power had shifted. For the first time, the room wasn't orbiting her gravity. It was mine now. I stood, not for drama, just because I was ready. I didn't come here to argue. I didn't come for revenge. I came because silence protects the wrong people, and I won't be quiet anymore. A beat, then applause, not wild, not loud, but steady. Margot stepped beside me, slid her arm around my shoulders, like armor. You don't need to prove anything else, honey, she whispered. You already won. And for once, I believed it. You'd think victory would feel like fireworks. It doesn't. It feels like silence, a clean kind. Not the quiet of waiting or bracing, but the quiet that comes after a storm. When the last branch stops swaying and the air settles into something still and sacred. That's what it felt like in the courtroom the day the judge ruled in my favor. His voice was steady, expression unreadable. Based on the evidence presented, including financial records, a verified video statement, and the original trust documents, the court rules in favor of the defendant, Miss Sienna Hart. The plaintiffs are ordered to return all diverted estate assets, with interest. Additional penalties will be filed under the Department of Revenue for fraudulent misrepresentation. He paused. Furthermore, any future contact with Ms. Hart must be consented to in writing. This court recognizes her full ownership of the property in question. Bang of the gavel. Just like that, it was over. No dramatic gasp, no courtroom outburst. Just a verdict that stripped every false layer off the lie they'd lived in. Outside, Darren shook my hand. You didn't just win, he said, almost smiling. You made it unignorable. That's rarer. The media didn't pick it up. Not right away. But word spread through town like spilled ink. People who used to cross the street to avoid my family now crossed it to talk to me. Neighbors who once whispered, "Poor Eli and Vivian," started saying, I never quite trusted them. Even my old manager at the hardware store texted me, "Heard you took down a whole legacy. Proud of you, kid." I didn't respond right away. I just sat on my front porch and breathed in the first air I'd felt belonged to me. The fallout came quickly. The IRS launched an audit that made my mother cry in 3 separate bank lobbies. My parents had to sell their lake house, the one they once told me I'd never be responsible enough to inherit. They listed it for half its value, still took 3 months to move it. Eli stopped showing up to Rotary meetings. Vivian stepped down from the school board. Their kingdom didn't burn down overnight, it unraveled. One dignity thread at a time. As for Landon, Grace left him 3 days after the ruling. She didn't even call, just mailed back his apartment key in a padded envelope with a post-it. I don't do liars, and I don't date men who need their mommy's lawyer. Brutal, perfect. He moved back in with my parents, though they pretended it was temporary. Rumor has it he tried to launch a YouTube crypto channel. It lasted 4 videos. The last one was titled, "When Family Betrays You," and had 11 views, 5 of which were probably bots. I didn't parade, didn't gloat, but I didn't hide either. One morning, I stood outside City Hall as they finalized the deed confirmation. A clerk handed me the certified copy. "So this house is finally all yours, huh?" he said with a grin. I smiled back. It always was. They just didn't know it. The next day, I framed that document. Hung it above the fireplace I rebuilt with my own hands, brick by reclaimed brick. The living room glowed golden in the afternoon sun, not from some cinematic filter, just light coming through windows I installed myself. Windows, my father once said, were too ambitious for someone like you. Funny thing about men like him, they love boxes, until the woman inside outgrows it. Vindication doesn't arrive in headlines, it arrives in the quiet. The legal recognition, the respect restored, the apology that never comes, but no longer matters. And it arrives in the freedom to say, "This is my life. You don't get to write the ending anymore." 1 year later, the hammering stopped. Not because the house was finally quiet, but because, for once, it didn't need saving anymore. I stood barefoot on the newly laid tile of my garden room, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Sunlight poured through the glass ceiling, warm and filtered, like forgiveness. The jasmine had started blooming along the back trellis, curling toward the light, like it had somewhere to be. And I was exactly where I was meant to be. The greenhouse wasn't part of the original blueprint. It was a dream I'd shelved more times than I could count. Too expensive, too complicated, too selfish, my mother once said. Who builds a glass room in a house no one wants? Turns out, me. And as I looked around, at the vintage potting bench I'd refinished myself, the salvaged wood shelves lined with seed trays, the faint hum of the irrigation system I installed one rainy weekend, it hit me. This wasn't just a greenhouse, it was a sanctuary, built not out of money, but of refusal. Refusal to believe I had to earn love by erasing myself. A soft knock on the side door. "You decent?" Margot's voice floated in. I grinned. I'm wearing overalls and covered in compost. That's about as decent as I get. She stepped in holding a folder. "You got mail." Inside, a small envelope, faded blue ink, the kind no one uses anymore. From Caleb Morrison, my grandmother's estate attorney. My hands stilled. We'd closed the legal battle months ago. I hadn't expected anything more. But inside was something I hadn't known I'd needed. A journal, my grandmother's, leather-bound, soft with age. No fanfare, no bow, just a note. "She asked me to deliver this once your name was cleared. She knew you'd need her words more than her money." My breath caught. I flipped to the last page. The handwriting curved gently, as if written on a porch in spring. "If you're reading this, my girl, then they didn't break you. They tried. I know they did. But you were never meant to fit their mold. You were meant to build your own blueprint. Remember, you don't need permission to be whole." Tears came. Not the jagged kind, but soft ones, like rain on glass. I wiped them away and looked up. Through the greenhouse ceiling, the sky was impossibly clear. This morning, I opened enrollment for my first workshop. Restoration for Women by Women. 12 slots filled in 3 hours. Most were strangers. One was my high school chemistry teacher. Another was the woman who once rented me a sander and said I didn't look like the handy type. Now, they'll learn to patch plaster, wire light switches, lay tile. But more than that, they'll learn what I did, that reclaiming a house can teach you to reclaim yourself. Later that night, I caught my reflection in the glass. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. She looked steady, not fearless, but grounded, like a woman who knew her own weight and no longer asked others for permission to carry it. I smiled, not out of pride, but out of peace, because for the first time in my life, the house wasn't just standing. I was. And this time, I wasn't holding it together for anyone but me.